Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining Metrics and Scaled Agile Framework. Let's begin. We're 5 minutes past our starting time, so I'll just get started, and we'll hopefully get others up to speed as they join. This is meant to be an introduction to Metrics and Scaled Agile Framework. So some of you may consider this to be very basic and a refresher for the metrics that you probably already know about and have been using and utilizing in your day-to-day life. For others, it might be net new information, and I will try and have another advanced series as a follow-up for this introductory session. So my name is Asim Kharbanda. I'm the founder of 10 Agile. I've been an enterprise agile coach and have been working in this industry for 20 plus years. I have managed the transition from waterfall to agile methodology, and I have seen agile applied successfully at teams, program, enterprise levels, and been part and parcel of transforming project management offices into an agile PMO, establishing lean agile centers of excellence. I'm a certified SAFe 5.0 program consultant and a coach, and I'm really passionate about the field of agile and how the industry, the landscape has been transforming, making use of the various agile practices and methodologies. So let's get the introductions going. Let's get to know a little bit about you. If you would go to menti.com, open a new browser window, and go to the menti.com website, type in the code that you see here on the screen, 306721. It's going to get you to a survey question, and just go ahead and answer that. What role do you play at work? And we'll get to take a look at the results. So I'm going to do a quick 60 seconds on the clock. Okay, these are our results. We have a good mix. We've got a few developers and testers, team members, almost an equal percentage of Scrum Master, Release Train Engineer, and a lot more Agile coaches. So this would be very interesting. We don't have any product managers or product owners. So if there are any questions around metrics for the POs, we'll probably cover those as well. And let's get to the next slide and talk about our agenda for the discussion today. So we'll focus on team metrics. I'll show you a really common team metrics that have been utilized by agile teams. Then we'll graduate to the program level, the agile release train, some of the metrics and measurements that can help a release train stay on track. We'll also introduce the DevOps Health Radar. This is a radar that helps assess the DevOps practice at the organization. And it's a very interesting tool, very helpful tool to not only ensure that you can create a DevOps pipeline, but also have a regular health check as you go along maintaining and taking benefits from that pipeline. We also introduced the innovation accounting concept and leading indicators versus lagging indicators, and how these indicators are extremely helpful and beneficial in assessing the health of your business and are also a true measure of business growth. We will wind up our conversation for today by bringing it all together to discuss the concept of business agility and how self-assessment can be utilized at the enterprise level to achieve business agility. So let's start a conversation by looking at team metrics. Some of these metrics might be really foundational and familiar to you. For example, the feature progress report. And that talks about when you come out of the PI planning session, you have a plan for the next 10 to 12 weeks, and the team start working on completing stories by each iteration. The feature progress report helps you measure your progress in terms of number of stories accepted versus the plan that you came out after the PI planning session. So let's take a look what that might look like. If you go to Scaled Agile Framework, this is a public page where you can just go to the metrics section. And if you look at the feature progress report, you might see a chart like this where it shows you the progress based on your plan. And are you within the 15% mark? Let's say if you came out of PI planning and the feature that was the highest priority had about 10 stories in it. Your plan was to probably complete 6 of those 10 stories by the end of second iteration. So the feature progress report is a really good and simple way to indicate, are you on track? Have you been able to complete 6 stories by the second iteration? And this is a really good measure to review it every iteration review, because it ensures that if you're not necessarily tracking to plan, if there's corrective action that has to be taken, um, those root causes can be reviewed and discussed. Another interesting team metric is the team PI performance report. As you probably know, teams run their iterations back to back. When they come out of PI planning, they already have an idea on the work that each team is going to be completing and the actual business value that gets delivered as part of completion of that work. However, the actual business value, when the integrated system component, integrated work product gets demonstrated at the PI system demo, each team gets a percentage achievement score. And that score is calculated by assignment of actual business value against the planned business value. So if you recall from the PI planning session on day 2, when business owners go around the room and assign business value, this is now an opportunity for business owners to assign actual business value and create a scorecard for each team. The team PI performance report is a measure of how effective the team was in achieving the business goals that were laid out for them. So let's take a look how that performance report looks like. You go back to the top of the page and click on Team PI Performance Report. As you can see, this is a sample objective sheet for the team. The planned value column was filled out during the PI planning day 2, and the actual value is filled out at the PI system demo. And you will get a percentage achievement score. A percentage achievement score of 90% is really great. Another important part to note is the uncommitted objectives also count towards the actual business value. Some of the other iteration metrics that you may already know and have been leveraging are planned versus actual velocity, or the number of stories that were planned and completed, the percentage of stories accepted, the number of defects, the number of tests. These are common metrics that can that I've seen come out of the box in some commercial off-the-shelf tools that are probably available and in common use. And you may have heard of other iteration metrics such as burn up, burn down charts, and those are fairly common as well. Another team metrics that is fairly interesting is the team and technical agility. This is a self-assessment exercise where teams are providing feedback on how they view built-in quality, technical competency, and the composition, structure, and alignment of the agile release train. So these 3 dimensions can be assessed at regular intervals, and it ensures that teams are self-organizing, cross-functional, and they are truly providing you the business value and truly transforming to become a cross-functional, self-sustaining agile team. So on the Scaled Agile metrics page, when we go back up to the home page, back up top, you can take a look at the team and technical agility self-assessment section. As you can see, there's a button here that allows you to download the technical agility assessment. This gives you an Excel sheet, and this is also available for free download when you go to the Scaled Agile metrics section. And once you've got this Excel sheet, you can utilize this to come up with a chart, which is on the second sheet of that Excel workbook. And on the first sheet, you will find questions with a scale on how your teams can measure their performance. It's important to understand that in a team which has been accustomed to typical waterfall methodologies and practices may be able to adapt some of the semantics around Agile fairly easily. They may pick up the Agile events and ceremonies fairly easily. However, the essence or the values and principles, those are the hardest to uh, follow, and the teams really have to be disciplined and consciously make those choices. And that is an area where self-assessment truly is a very valuable tool, um, because our biases kick in and we may resort to older ways of thinking and making decisions, which may not necessarily align with the concepts, the values, and principles of Agile. So, building the technical agility component, focusing relentlessly on built in quality is extremely important, and having periodic self assessment checks like this one at the team level can ensure that your teams are truly transforming and espousing to the self organizing and cross functional nature of Agile teams. So, this was a quick look at the team metrics. Now, let's go back to our Mentimeter. Go into menti.com, use the same code 306721, and tell us which of these team metrics do you currently use. It looks like a lot of you are using the velocity plan actual, feature progress report, stories, plan defects, etc. However, nobody is using the team self-assessment. And I would suggest making use of it. You can also reach out to one of the safe partners, which is Agility Health Radar, and they have tools and radars similar to this one that you see here, and a nicely defined Excel sheet that you can roll out to your teams, as well as a web interface that can help provide a little bit more information on those metrics. So let's keep moving. Let's talk about program metrics. Cumulative flow diagram is a term that most people are familiar with. It shows the flow of work through various stages. And if you're familiar with Kanban stages, this diagram helps visualize the team's progress, and it can also show areas of improvement, areas that have been blocked. And it's a really visual tool that can help the teams in agile release trains review their progress. We've often used the cumulative flow diagram during retrospectives as a way to introspect on the last 2 weeks, or even during PI system demos during the last PI. So let's take a look at how this chart can help the teams. Going up top, let's take a look at the cumulative flow diagram. These stages might sound familiar to some of you who've been using the standard Kanban stages. But as you can see in this chart, the thicker areas in this diagram can represent potential bottlenecks. And the thickness of each area can help identify the amount of time a specific work item is spending in that given stage. So in general, if you see a really even or a smooth pattern for each area, then there's probably not a whole lot to worry about. But if you see one area a lot thicker than the others, and you see a convergence point where these are some of the potentials for identifying your blockages and introspecting on what might have happened that caused the unevenness in these areas. Another important point to remember, these are sample stages. Your Kanban stages might be the same as identified in this sample, or they might be very specific to your organization. Another simple way to identify those Kanban stages is conduct a value stream analysis and come up with the various stages that you can identify a work item going from concept to delivery. At the program level, another important metric is the efficiency of continuous delivery pipeline. If you've just started making transition towards agile, you may not have a continuous delivery pipeline, or you may still be thinking about creating one. But if you do have a pipeline that embraces the concept of continuous exploration, integration, and deployment, it's important to measure the time that is spent adding value versus the wait time. Because in most cases, the wait time is going to be a larger chunk of the total time spent, and thereby any reduction that you can have in wait time is going to reduce your time to market, which means that you're going to be a lot more competitive in terms of delivery of value compared to your competitors in the industry. So how might that chart be how might that chart show up? It's a really simple bar chart, and the UI can differ based on the agile reporting tool you might utilize, but a vanilla representation is what's on the website, which is available freely. And as you can see, it is identifying touch time, which is the time spent adding value, versus the wait time. And you could accumulate this information using simple Excel sheets, or if you have an agile tool in place that does the aggregation for you. The pipeline efficiency is important because agile transformation journey is a long one, and you might start putting the pieces together for your delivery pipeline. You might also start investing in automation, and this simple chart can help review the efficiency of the pipeline on periodic intervals, and thereby ensuring that the lead time can reduce and you can measure and visualize how that efficiency is improving over various periodic intervals. On the same vein, we'll talk about deployment and release frequency. This could be a line chart that shows the number of deployments to production as well as releases per program increment. Deployments to production traditionally have coincided with the concept of releasing to the customer. We're all familiar with the release weekend, where teams are, huddled together for, 16, 18, 24 hours, trying to make sure that their software goes out the door during that window, because all the user acceptance testing, the system testing happens in that specific weekend. And that is contrary to the continuous delivery pipeline concept, where deployment to production happens on a periodic basis. However, deployment to production doesn't necessarily coincide with a release. So the deployment frequency can be plotted on a chart when compared with the number of releases that are happening in a given PI or across PIs. For a release to take place, your customers should be ready to accept that release. They may have a learning curve on their side to be able to absorb this new functionality. They may have to ready some of their systems, but that should not stop your organization or handicap your development teams in any shape or form when they're looking to deploy to production. So a line bar, a line chart as simple as this can indicate the frequency with which production software is being deployed and compare it to the number of releases that you may have across PIs. In the same way, you can also see deploys and releases per iteration. This could be really helpful at the team level, and the aggregated information is available per PI. Other common program performance reports include looking at aggregated velocity at the program level, a PI predictability measure, which aggregates the achievement scores for each team on an agile release train to give you a consolidated view of the achievement score for an agile release train. Similar to percentage stories planned and accepted, at the program level, value delivery happens in terms of features and enablers. So we talk about number of features planned versus accepted, and defects, as well as the non-functional requirements. And these are standard charts that are available to you in Agile reporting tools. Here's the program predictability measure. As you can see, each team's objective sheet will have a percentage achievement score, which is calculated by aggregating the actual values, and a program predictability measure chart that can be laid out for different PIs. And it indicates how there might be a real huge contrast between team A and team B. However, the aggregated score for the agile release train might still fall within a specific control band. So for an enterprise or stakeholders at the program level, having a consolidated view takes the noise out of the decision making process, helps them really focus on the predictability for an agile release train, and can also help them identify um, how confident they could be given an agile release train predictability being in the higher end of the control band versus the lower end. So let's talk about the program metrics that you might currently use. Go to menti.com. This time the code is slightly different. This is 3171. Go into another browser window, type in menti.com and type in the code 3171. Okay, we have results coming in. Looks like some of you are using predictability measure. Some of you are using CFD as well as the deployment release frequency. Let's now talk about the Safe DevOps Health Radar. This is a really helpful tool, and as I was mentioning earlier, we cover this to great extent in the DevOps Plus, which is an entire 2-day workshop, which helps you identify your value streams, and we work off of a sample case study. If you bring a case study from your own environment, we can definitely utilize that. However, we look at these 4 dimensions in terms of exploration, integration, deployment, and release on demand. And based on the scale that is identified for each of these subdimensions, we start collecting information on where you are in your current state for each of these subdimensions, and what might you need to do to get to the next level of agile maturity. The dimensions that you see up top, which are part of the continuous delivery pipeline: continuous exploration, continuous integration, continuous deployment, and release on demand. These are business dimensions. The subdimensions talk about IT focused work that the IT teams may be involved in to achieve the business dimensions goals. And the DevOps Health Radar is a really interesting and unique approach to measuring um, where you might be in terms of the continuous delivery pipeline. So let's take a look at how that DevOps Health Radar might show up. Go to the top of the page and talk about the Safe DevOps Health Radar. And you can also download the DevOps Health Radar. This is an Excel sheet that shows you the four outer dimensions and the subdimensions underneath each of the outer dimensions. On this chart, you would see a scale of 1 through 5, going from the lowest to the highest maturity in a given subdimension. And as you try and comprehend the activities that are required on each subdimension, you'll have an opportunity to assess where your practices might be falling short or where you may need to make some corrective action. And at the end of the day, as we go through the exercise, we'll help you uh, place a dot on each of these subdimensions in order to try and fill out the DevOps Health Radar, which in turn provides you a spider chart. And that kind of becomes a baseline the first time you do that. And at each periodic interval, you can utilize the same number of questions and go back and assess if you've made progress in a specific subdimension. And each periodic interval will provide you an aging of the safe DevOps Health Radar. So I found this to be a really interesting and exciting tool. It's a true eye opener. The very first time product owners, product managers, um, DevOps engineers, system engineers, when they participate in this exercise and start to view this on a system-wide scale, and it really truly helps them visualize and gets them out of the short-sighted view that they might have confined themselves to. So let's go back to our Menti meter, the menti.com. We'll go to the same code 3171 and let's see if you can rank from highest to lowest in terms of the agile maturity of these dimensions. So pick the one that you feel is the most mature dimension in your organization, and then it's going to create another drop down with the label second and go down to the fourth drop down. So let's go ahead and fill that one out. That's very interesting. As you can see, the dimensions kind of moving up. So it's not a huge surprise noticing that the continuous integration is being ranked to the top, as I would imagine the development and the development capabilities um, probably getting the most attention. The exploration and deployment, perhaps not so much, which is what I've seen and was also expecting in a way. And release on demand almost consistently ranks the lowest because release traditionally has been considered a function of the development and deployment teams, wherein in the continuous delivery pipeline, we're making a distinction and we're saying each of these three aspects are continuous in nature. However, the function of release of software is now in the hands of business. So we are actually separating the aspect of releasing software, and we're truly aiming towards providing software on demand with certain caveats, of course. But having the ability to release on demand isn't something that an organization or an enterprise can build overnight. But it's really interesting to see how this is the view that I've seen in most organizations. So thank you for taking this survey. Let's talk a little bit about the concept of innovation accounting. And before I jump into that, I want to get your attention towards vanity metrics. Now, there are certain metrics um, that can be measured and that people sometimes get really excited about those metrics. However, these metrics do not relate to growth in business, such as page visits or social media subscribers or the number of free downloads that your website is getting or the advertisement spend. Can you truly equate these metrics to the growth in business? These metrics will only um, tell you your exposure and is it truly indicating that customers are buying the service or product that you're selling? No. All they're saying is you're getting a lot of attention, but is that truly converting into business activity? And if we track these metrics, then sometimes, or I should say most of the times, these metrics are going to um, give us a really good feeling. We're going to sway us into that direction where we might feel that our business is really progressing, growing, but in reality, that's not the case. And thereby, we use that term vanity metrics because they don't necessarily relate to growth in business. Then what does? Leading indicators such as the website conversion rate, or the return on advertisement spending, or your social media conversion rate. Those are the indicators that can indicate if your business is growing or receding as you start to measure those over a given time period. So think about what has happened in this time where we are in a situation where the online marketplace companies such as Amazon, online marketing has picked up such a huge amount, and um, the e-business capabilities have been truly tested. The cloud capabilities have been truly tested. So there must be a huge uptick in those indicators rather than looking at page visits and free downloads because they don't necessarily translate to growth in business. So the concept of innovation accounting uh, tries to focus on the build, measure, and learn cycle. Whenever you're in the whenever whatever you're creating, if that requires multiple teams to come together, multiple trains to integrate their work product, and is truly and you're truly in the business of building something of epic proportion, then you may want to um, start with a minimum viable product, which is the bare minimum set of features that can satisfy your customer's requirement and gives them something that they can actually try out and provide feedback on. And rather than and obviously that can be done in a short amount of time. So that's the build part. And by demonstrating it, you're asking your customers to provide feedback. You're able to measure um, some of the metrics that can really help you understand if the value has been delivered. And you have an opportunity to learn from it. So the concept of an epic, where we are laying out a hypothesis and trying to validate that hypothesis and with incremental value delivery, goes a long way in um, reducing your risk as well as satisfying your customer, reducing your lead time. And this is an approach that really focuses on making sure that you're truly taking an economic view of the entire situation. So start adopting innovation accounting into the products and services that you're building, and start reducing the risk, especially when you're building these services or products of epic proportions that can truly take multiple years to build. And it in the past we've seen so many projects go through the same cycle where you might start on something huge which takes 6, 12, 18 months to deliver, and by the time you get to the market there's probably a product that's already out there and you're kind of dead on arrival. So helping making use of the build, measure, learn cycle, and looking at these innovative ideas that might originate from your teams, ensuring that you can measure and establish some accountability to those ideas in reducing your risk follows in the footsteps of the innovation accounting concept. So let's try and bring all of this discussion together. And we've talked a little bit about metrics at the team, the program, as well as the enterprise level. Now, if we start looking at the concept of business agility, how does our enterprise truly embrace agility so that we can deliver value in the shortest possible time? We're now focusing on each of these competencies. And incidentally, these are the competencies that you would see in the Scaled Agile framework. If you go to the big picture, you'll see these competencies that were the 7 competencies that were part and parcel of the 5.0, which goes from the organizational agility all the way to lean agile leadership. So these skill sets need to be built. And if you have these skill sets, you will have to continuously measure your proficiency and how you can improve these skill sets. So the business agility assessment, which is also available for download from the Scaled Agile website, starts to measure your proficiency in each of these 7 competencies by looking at the dimensions that are within each competency. So if you go to the Scaled Agile framework and click on the metrics page, you should be able to look at business agility self-assessment in the enterprise section and be able to download an Excel sheet that helps identify subdimensions for each of the 7 competencies. And as you start to roll this out, this has the same scale of 1 through 5. You're going to be able to start with a baseline view, and then at each periodic interval, assess where you are and which areas do you need to make improvements on. So that gets us to the end of a real quick introduction to metrics in Scaled Agile framework. Hope this was useful to you. If you have any questions, please post them in the chat window. And if you don't have anything right away, do reach out to us at 10agile.com, and we would be extremely happy to assist. We also have trainings on the SAFE courses, the 2-day and the 3-day, that go into a lot more detail in some of the topics that we've discussed. Do take a look at the SAFE classes that we've posted out there. I appreciate spending your evening with us, and we truly look forward to having you at the next webinar. Thank you and have a good night.